Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unravel the mysteries lurking in the shadows and explore the stories that send shivers down your spine. From unsolved crimes to paranormal encounters, from eerie legends to the unknown, we're here to take you on a journey into the unexplained. Every story has layers, and every layer brings us closer to the truth, or deeper into the mystery. So grab a seat, turn down the lights, and get ready to dive into the unknown. This is the Deep Dive.
We're talking BlackRock today, and that insane amount of money they manage. It's, well, kind of terrifying if you think about it. Are they like secretly pulling the strings of the global economy, or are they just, really good at this whole finance thing?
That means a single company controls a level of wealth that's hard to even fathom.
Right. They've quietly become one of the most powerful financial players in the world, and today we're taking a deep dive into their world. Specifically, we're wading into these articles that you sent us about index funds and whether this whole idea of green capitalism is all it's cracked up to be.
Yet what's fascinating about BlackRock is that their influence stretches far beyond Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most people have no idea how deeply embedded they are in virtually every aspect of the global economy.
Right, because it's not like they're making like flashy products or, like a Tesla or, something that we use every day. So for those of you who haven't encountered BlackRock on your morning commute, let's break down what they actually do.
Today, we're going deep on a company that's basically become a byword for big finance.
You've heard the whispers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even some of those like wilder theories floating around out there. But we're here to really unpack what's actually going on behind their massive influence.
Because we're starting with a number that's, well, pretty hard to even get your head around. BlackRock manages $10.6 trillion.
Seriously, $10.6 trillion.
Trillion with a T.
Wow, that's more than half of the entire U.S. GDP. So it's kind of like this black hole of money, just sucking in everything in its path.
Precisely. So first things first, what does an asset manager actually do with that much cash?
Right. It's almost impossible to fathom that amount of money. But it's important to remember it's not actually BlackRock's money. They manage it. Like, your pension funds, your big insurance companies, those sorts of institutions. Think of them as the ultimate investors trying to make that money grow over time.
So like a giant investment club, but for like really, really big players.
In a sense. But it's not just the super rich, Remember all those retirement savings you've been putting away?
There's a decent chance a chunk of that is swimming around in that $10.6 trillion pool, too. And their main tool for growing that mountain of money.
Something called index funds.
Index funds. Yeah, those always seemed kind of like the vanilla ice cream of investing to me.
That's a really good way to put it.
They're not flashy, but they're a core part of many portfolios. Instead of trying to pick individual winning stocks, imagine betting on the entire stock market.
That whole thing.
Exactly. That's essentially what an index fund does.
It's called passive investing because you're in it for the long game. So no trying to time the market or find those hot stock tips.
Nope. They're essentially saying we're betting on the whole economy long term.
So they make their money how exactly? Just from however well these index funds perform.
That's where it gets interesting. BlackRock makes its money through fees on the money they manage, not necessarily on how well your investments are actually doing.
Hold on. So even if my retirement account is flatlining, BlackRock is still taking their cut.
Essentially, yes. And from their perspective, it makes sense. They're providing a service, right?
But it does create, shall we say, an interesting incentive structure.
Interesting how?
Well, as finance professor Benjamin Braun put it, the fees you earn increase when the market value of the assets you manage increases. When you have $10 trillion, you have to put them somewhere, and eventually that somewhere becomes everywhere.
Everywhere might be an understatement. So they're driven to just keep growing that pot of money, regardless of what's in it?
Yeah. And that brings us to a concept that's really at the core of understanding BlackRock's influence. Universal ownership. Imagine this. BlackRock, along with a couple of other giants, Vanguard and State Street.
The big three, right?
They own a slice, maybe a small slice, but a significant one, of almost every major company out there.
Wait, seriously, are you saying BlackRock is like a silent partner in everything?
Pretty much. We're talking a stake of, say, 3%, maybe up to 10% in almost every company you can think of.
Which with $10 trillion, even a small percentage is still an insane amount of money.
Exactly. And here's the real catch. If they tried to sell all those shares at once.
It'd be like yanking the rug out from under the whole market. The stock would plummet. So they're basically locked in, which plays right into that whole passive investing strategy.
So they're stuck, but in a way that gives them even more leverage.
You're getting it. To give you an idea, think about this when company ownership is spread out. Even owning 5% can make you the single largest shareholder.
So it's not just how much they own, it's how that ownership positions them. It's like they've got a hand in every cookie jar. But how does this translate into actual power, on the ground? Like, do they get to waltz into Amazon and tell Jeff Bezos what to do?
Not exactly waltzing in, but their influence runs a lot deeper than you'd think.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Think about it. Let's say you have a retirement account. You probably own shares in companies like, I don't know, Apple, Amazon, maybe even that little coffee shop you love down the street.
Yeah, sure, I get it. But those are technically my shares, right?
Technically, yes.
Uh-huh.
But here's the thing. You've entrusted your money to an institutional investor, like a pension fund, to manage it for you. And those big institutions, they often turn to companies like BlackRock to actually do the investing.
So my money, without me even realizing it, is being used to buy tiny pieces of companies all over the place.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Remember those ownership stakes we talked about? Well, they come with voting rights. So let me ask you this. If BlackRock owns even a small percentage of every major company, what kind of power do you think that gives them?
Okay, so this whole voting rights thing, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of freaking me out a little. So they've got this, mountain of shares, right? And that means they get to vote on how these companies are run. But there have to be rules, right? Like they can't just, I don't know, walk in and start making demands just because it's good for BlackRock, can they?
You'd think so, right. But it's not always that simple. Research has actually shown that BlackRock often votes with company management, even on issues that, well, let's just say, some people might see as not exactly benefiting the average investor, people like you and me.
Wait, hold on, really? Why would they side with the corporate bigwigs when, in theory, it's our money they're playing with? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Some experts even call it a shareholder oligarchy instead of shareholder democracy.
A shareholder oligarchy.
Yeah. Basically, a small group of really powerful players, like, you guessed it, BlackRock, end up with way more influence than they probably should have.
That sounds kind of ominous, to be honest.
It definitely raises some questions about, who's really benefiting from the current system.
So they can ensure companies are playing by BlackRock's rules, even if those rules aren't exactly in the public's best interest. Are there any real-world examples of this?
Plenty. For example, in 2020, BlackRock actually voted against a shareholder resolution that would require a major energy company to set more ambitious targets for reducing its greenhouse gas emissions.
Interesting.
So critics argued that this was a clear example of BlackRock prioritizing its own financial interests over environmental concerns.
Okay, so that's proxy voting.
And then there's the issue of, well, competition, or the lack thereof. If these big three own significant chunks of all the big players in an industry,
Yeah.
what incentive do those companies have to, I don't know, lower prices, actually compete with each other?
It's like a weird game where they're playing both sides.
In a way.
So they benefit from keeping prices high because they're invested in all sides.
It's not quite that simple.
But there is a logic to it.
Was that what happened with Nike and Adidas?
You remember that?
Vaguely.
Well, because these big firms, BlackRock included, own pieces of both companies.
They're not exactly incentivized to see them slash prices and undercut each other,
Even if it means we're all paying more for sneakers.
It's like they're playing chess on a global scale.
And we're all just like pawns in their game.
And it gets even more complicated when you start to look at the revolving door between BlackRock and the government.
Oh, right. Wasn't there something about a bunch of former government officials ending up working at BlackRock? They hire former government officials, they lobby extensively.
So are they trying to write the rules in their favor? Is that what's going on?
Again, it's hard to say for sure.
But it definitely looks a little suspicious. And then there's this whole other thing, the passivity loophole.
That sounds ominous.
It's basically this system where BlackRock, because they do so much passive investing through index funds, gets to decide for itself if it's being passive enough to avoid certain regulations.
Hold on. They get to, like, grade their own homework with trillions of dollars at stake.
You see why some people might find this a little problematic.
Problematic might be an understatement. I mean, this system, it feels like,
It's complex.
it's a little bit rigged, isn't it?
You could say that.
And the story gets even more, well, tangled when you realize just how interconnected all the players in this world really are.
Wow, this is even wilder than I thought.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. It really is. Okay, so we've gone down this rabbit hole of BlackRock's influence. And so where do we even go from here?
Well, remember how we were talking about BlackRock's biggest investors?
Buckle up, because it gets a little crazy here.
Okay.
The biggest investors in BlackRock are none other than Vanguard and State Street.
Wait, so you're saying
Big three, yeah,
the big three are each other's biggest investors?
pretty much.
It's like this financial ecosystem where they all feed each other. So it's not just BlackRock by itself. It's this, like, interconnected web of these massive asset managers all getting bigger, all getting more influence.
That's the reality of the financial system today.
And that is honestly kind of terrifying.
It's definitely something to think about.
So after all this, it all comes back to that original question. Does BlackRock own everything?
They might not, like, literally own it all.
But their control is undeniable. They've mastered the system, you know?
They wrote the rule book and then just gave themselves all the best cards.
Something like that.
And meanwhile, we're all kind of stuck playing along.
We all participate in this system, yeah.
And it's not like any of us really understand it.
Well, that's why we're doing this deep dive.
True. So where do we go from here? What can we even do about any of this?
This is a lot to take in. So should I be freaking out right now? Like, if I have a 401k, am I, like, doomed? What can I even do about any of this? It feels so big, you know?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is don't panic. Like, seriously. The goal is to be, empowered. The system is, yeah, it's huge and it's complicated. But that doesn't mean that your choices don't matter.
Okay, that's good to hear. So not about feeling powerless, it's about, like, taking back some of that power. But how? Where do I even start?
Right. And they say knowledge is power. It's a cliche, but it's true. Step one is just understanding the system itself. How does this stuff actually work? Where is your money going? Once you know that, then you can decide, okay, where do I want it to go? And what kind of impact do I want it to have?
In some of the stuff we looked at, there were people talking about possible solutions like, I don't know, maybe we should be regulating these giant asset managers more like banks, right? Like more transparency, tighter rules.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of discussions going on right now about that very thing, more transparency, making these firms, show us what they're doing, maybe even limiting how much voting power they actually have.
So it's not totally hopeless. There are people out there trying to, like, actually fix the system. But what about on a smaller scale? Like, just me as an individual investor. I'm not exactly Warren Buffett over here.
And that's fine. Even small changes, they can make a difference. Look for, funds that care about ethical investing or ones that focus on companies with, like, really strong track records on social and environmental responsibility, that kind of thing. There are even apps now that can, like, analyze your portfolio and tell you, hey, does this actually match up with your values? It's pretty cool.
Right. And I guess there's always, like, speaking up, calling your representatives, supporting organizations that are pushing for change.
Exactly. Don't underestimate the power of people coming together and saying, hey, this isn't good enough. When enough people demand better, things actually can change. It might seem, it seems like a David and Goliath situation going up against a giant like BlackRock. But it all starts with, like you said, understanding the rules of the game and then using our voices and our money to make it better.
Wow. So it's not even really about, like, whether BlackRock is good or bad. It's more about realizing that the system we've built, it's got some problems. And that we, even if we're not billionaires, we can actually do something about it.
Now you're getting it. It's about realizing that we actually have more power than we think we do. It's about asking questions, being informed, and, not being afraid to stand up and say, we can do better than this.
I have to say, I'm feeling a lot less terrified and a lot more, empowered than I did when we started this whole thing. So listeners, next time you hear someone mention BlackRock, just remember your money has power, even if you're not, swimming in it. Be curious, ask questions, and don't be afraid to make your voice heard. That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for listening.
And that's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive. I hope you enjoyed today's exploration into today's mystery and that it gave you some valuable insights to think about. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on all our future deep dives. As always, thanks for diving deep with us today. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.